There are two moles inside of Church Militant leaking information to one of Mike Parrott's pals, who in turn is giving the information to Mike Parrott. Hello, everyone. This is Christine Harrington with Eternal Life Plan. And I've had a lot of people, high influencers in the Catholic social media space, that have asked me to come forward and talk about my response to Michael Voris. I've also had a lot of followers reach out and ask me my opinion as well. So this video is to address this, but also to address what I found out. There are two moles that are leaking information. And the only way that this information could be leaked is by board members. That's right, you heard that right. Because my time with Church Militant, as you know, was from September of 2021 through April of 2022. And it was a 5-month short-lived employment there. And I saw a lot, I heard a lot, and I observed a lot as well. So hear me out on this. This is why it has to be a board member that's leaking the information. When I worked at Church Militant, we were never privy to any communication at all. We were rarely told anything that was going on. We wouldn't even know if Michael Voris was moving in a new direction or not. So it has to be a board member that's leaking this information. I started getting direct messages 3 days before Christine Niles resigned. And then shortly after that, I was getting direct messages that Michael Voris was also going to be forced to resign. Now, I can tell you, in the studio, they didn't know any of this. So it has to be a board member that's leaking the information to one of Mike Parrott's pals. I know who the pal is, but I'm not going to say who it is. So something happened. This board, who consisted mostly of Church Militant employees and a friend of Michael Voris's, he was completely surrounded by yes people all the time. This board is not going to push back on him at all. So something happened that pushed these board members back to the wall, where they were forced into making this decision to oust Michael Voris. They can spin it every way that they want. A morality clause, yeah, I'll get into that. The morality clause was in the employee handbook, and it actually made me chuckle, because part of it is that you have to treat each other by the golden rule, treat each other as fellow Christians. There wasn't much Catholic going on inside of Church Militant other than the chapel. Now, there were a few people that were very courteous, very accommodating, very nice to work with. But for the most part, everyone was vying to be a little Michael and to eventually take Michael's place. So they all emulated Michael and Michael's behavior. So that's why I know that this board had to have had their back up against the wall to claim that it was a morality clause. Now, it could be that that's what he violated. they have fired people for breaking the morality clause in the past, but I don't think that was why. I think there's something bigger coming down the pike that we don't know about yet, because this board would have never stood up to Michael like this and asked him to resign unless their backs were against the wall. And of course, included in the morality clause is that you uphold the church's teachings when it comes to sex and when it comes to the church's teaching on homosexuality. Everyone jumps to the conclusion that that is the clause, part of the clause that Michael broke, but I don't know that at all, because the morality clause is pretty broad in the handbook. And I looked for it and I don't have it any longer. So that's not something that I can, speak to any kind of depth to. I'm just going by memory. But you should also know too that we all were required to sign a non-disclosure agreement as well. So there are some things I'm not going to be able to talk about because of that. And I thought that was very curious, to be honest with you, when I started working at Church Militant, that I was required to sign this. Now, this is not uncommon. I come from a corporate background, 40 years in corporate insurance. Oftentimes we had to sign non-disclosure agreements. But for the life of me, I was like, well, why would a Catholic media company require us to do this? So as far as the NDA, there are certain things that I'm not going to be able to talk about, but I will talk about what Christine Niles put in her statement after Voris released his. And in that statement, she said that Voris often did not attend chapel. Now, I can substantiate that that is true. I can also substantiate that we were all required and mandated to attend chapel. But Voris wasn't the only one that wasn't attending chapel. There were managers and board members that didn't attend chapel as well. Now, I don't know why they were given a special privilege not to attend, because it was my understanding and what I was told everyone was mandatory to attend chapel. But let me give you my story about chapel. So my first week there at Church Militant, chapel is from 8 a.m. until 8:45. We do the noon Angelus, and then 5 o'clock evening vespers until 5:30 or 5:45. It depends. So, 8 o'clock rolls around, everybody's, shuffling into chapel, and I'm new, so I sit in the back. And they let it go the first day, but then the second day, they told me I had to sit either up front or in the middle. And I'm thinking, well, why is that? Why do I have to do that? I went ahead and sat up front, and then I was told the third day when I went and sat in the back again that I had to sit in the middle or up front. And, I said, why? What difference does it make? And they said, because you're not on camera when you're sitting in the back. Oh, so we're in chapel for the audience? We're in chapel to show that we're praying? I thought we were in chapel to show reverence to Jesus and to God, and to increase our spiritual life, and to pray for the day that we may honor God in our work. I'm thinking that's why we were doing chapel. But no, I had to sit where I could be seen. So that was a red flag. And then on day one, working there, I was told that I was not to speak to Michael. I was only to speak to Michael if Michael spoke to me. I was to not try to catch his eye, not try to catch his attention. In other words, I'm to be seen and not heard. And that, I not to ask him any questions because he was a very important man. I thought that was rather curious as well. Now, I came from a corporate background. I know how to conduct myself professionally. I was not a fawning fan working for Michael because, I was one of his fan girls. No, that's not why I was there. So I didn't. I didn't talk to Michael. I didn't look at Michael until we had pit meetings and he would conduct the pit meetings. And then we would get yelled and screamed at for something that was done wrong. If they had a problem with one person made a mistake, we all got hit with the wrath. So, recently I was told that their best editor had quit just a few weeks ago without a job because of another one of Michael Voris's rants in the studio. I mean, it was commonplace. It didn't happen every day, but it was commonplace. And to give you an idea of my schedule, I was up in Detroit for a week, and then I was home working remote for 3 weeks. And then I'd go up for a week, work at home for 3 weeks. The idea was I was supposed to move up there in July of 2022. Well, thank God that I didn't do that because, in less than 6 months later, I would have been one of the people that have gotten laid off. I mean, that's a big expense, a big expense. And that's another thing that I don't think people realize, the sacrifices that people made in order to work at Church Militant. They moved away from their families. They moved into a area, Detroit area. I mean, it was much higher in housing and food and living expenses than it was in Indianapolis. So I would have been leaving my family, my friends, to move up to Detroit. I was willing to do that because I thought that's the calling God gave me, but I was wrong. So back to Christine Niles' statement about the chapel. Christine had different hours than everybody else in the studio. She usually came in about late morning or early afternoon. Sometimes she was there for the Angelus, sometimes she wasn't. But she was always in chapel for evening prayers. But she did have a different schedule than the rest of us. And I can't really speak to that, why that was, but she did. She often worked at home. And it could have been possibly because I do recall that she was homeschooling her children as well. But I will say this about Christine Niles. She really helped me while I was at Church Militant. She was one of the few people that was willing to review my work, to help me with my writing, because I only got like a day and a half of training, and that was it. And they hired me knowing, like they've hired all these people, knowing that they had never worked in a media company before, had never written scripts, had never written articles. And so, we got a few hours of training, was, kind of sink or swim thing. And about the third and fourth month, I was hearing in the grapevine that, if I didn't improve, that they heard that I was going to get fired. And Christine Niles really, I asked her if she would help me. She said she would, and she did. She really did help me. She put a lot of time and effort into helping me. So I have always appreciated that Christine did that for me. But as far as working in the studio, there was a constant crisis going on all the time, constant drama going all the time. And since I was writing scripts for evening news, during that 5 months, the set for evening news changed 5 to 6 different times during that 5 months period I was there. They were always changing the set. Now, keep in mind, this was all being paid for by donors. All of our salaries were being paid for by the donors. All of the board members were being paid by money from the donors. It was all supported by premium subscribers and donorship. So just like we get upset because as taxpayers, our money is being spent frivolously, I can't say that word, being spent by the government like it's their money, the donor money at Church Militant was being spent as if that was Michael Voris's money, and it was not his money. And what I mean by that is, if there was any kind of financial consideration being done, I would think that would have to be approved by the board. That Michael couldn't just decide to spend, $60,000. That he would have to run that by the board first. I would think that's the way it should be. But when the board is your friends and your coworkers, how much pushback are you going to get? Boards that I've been on, typically they comprise of an attorney, a doctor, a CEO from another company, an accountant. There's a lot of outside people that are board members, and I don't recall even knowing about a board that was heavily made up by employees. I mean, that's usually unheard of for boards. So all this money that was being spent by Michael on evening news and the lawsuits that he had filed, all of this just takes a toll financially. So in October 2022, when they said that there may be layoffs, good grief, they would have known then that they would have had to have laid off. I mean, I don't know why it took them to March to finally do the layoffs, but they would have known back in October. If someone wasn't feeding Michael the right financial information, he should have known the dire straits that they were in. In studio, the pit is what they called it, where the reporters and the editors virtually lived. I mean, it was a lot of long hours, a lot of good people sacrificing their personal lives for Church Militant, working these long hours. Many of them really cared about the work that they were doing. They wanted to put out good work. But the apostolate, the mission of Church Militant, started moving in a different direction. It started moving away from more faith-based reporting, teaching, providing educational videos for Catholics, to being more news and then more political news. And that's really where Michael wanted to take it. It seemed like he wanted to take it in complete deep dive into politics. And so over the 2 years, you could see this buildup, this angry buildup within him. And, I could see it. I don't know what he was like before I came on board, but you could see it in his Vortex videos. He was getting angrier and angrier and angrier, and he was getting more and more aggressive towards bishops and priests as well. You know, I had some Catholic influencers DM me and shared with me what they witnessed Michael Voris do at conferences and different events that they would see Michael at. And it was anything but Catholic. And this is what happens. I can address this because I'm post-abortive, and post-abortive women will go in one or two directions. They will bury their shame, their guilt, their regret so deep that they'll either get loud and proud, or they'll get very depressed and spiral into addictions. The same thing with Michael. Whatever his demons are, you can't keep pushing them down. You can't keep pushing them away. You have to address them. And when you don't address them, Michael did the opposite of what I did. I went inward and became depressed. Michael went outward and released his anger and resentment. Before Michael started into Catholic media, he should have taken time to resolve those issues, but he didn't. And now he has to take the time to do it now. If he thinks he can have it whipped in a year, no, it's going to take him decades. And frankly, until he knows how to control himself, he should not ever get back into media. And these same Catholic influencers that DM me also shared with me that, you know, Christine Niles and Michael Voris has burned so many bridges that other Catholic media companies don't want to deal with them. They don't want to allow them into their world. They've hurt a lot of people with a hungry dog going after a bone attitude that this will not be easily forgotten. Matter of fact, most of the DMs I got was not even remotely compassionate about what happened to Niles and Voris. It was kind of, they got what they deserved, they reaped what they sowed, and I'm praying for them, but they need to stay out of media. Those are the direct messages I got. So through all of this pain, there are still good people left at Church Militant, but there are still two moles inside of Church Militant that is giving information to Michael Parrott's pal. And that needs to be uprooted. There are still many Michael Vorises running around there, two that come to mind, that are both misogynistic men. And that's another thing. Women were treated horribly at Church Militant. That was another thing that shocked me. And I'm not going to go into those stories, but I can tell you it happened. All right, everyone, I have a new video that's going to come out later in the week, and it will be a delight. So I hope you tune back in. So God bless you all. I'm sorry to come to you with another piece of heavy news. I didn't intend to do this, but, you know, people encouraged me to do it, to tell my side of the story and what I found out. And there are two moles inside of Church Militant. That's pretty sad. And last, you know how I end. Eternal life is forever. Got a plan? Keep Michael Voris, Christine Niles, and Church Militant in your prayers. Bye-bye.